I'm still thinking about atheism and poetics, and poetic atheism. Oh, car going past, hold on. I'm right on the edge of this country park, there's a little road there, so we do get traffic. But yeah, atheist poetics, which sounds like an oxymoron, but really the way I'm interpreting it is that it's basically a question, you know, is there, just in our language, in our expressions that we use, is there a whole set of ideas which are usually associated with theology? Does God kind of haunt our language? That's the first thing. Or not necessarily God, but you know, religious concepts, spiritual concepts. Are they just in our language, even though we don't recognise that? That's the first bit. Secondly, is it possible to evacuate or let God talk from our language? And thirdly, if it wasn't possible to do that, would it be a problem? Yeah, so does God haunt our language, or not? If not God, then at least religious concepts. And I think in many ways, I think it does actually, for reasons I'm going to have to think about, historical reasons. But certainly a lot of the way we talk, and I don't mean consciously. I mean all the unconscious stuff, all the use of metaphor and figurative speech, and sentence construction, and that level. And this is reflective of our thought. You know, I'm assuming that the language we speak is reflective of the mobilization and the construction of concepts. So that if I'm saying God and spiritual and religious ideas are haunting our language, I'm saying they're also there in our thinking, even if we're atheists, which I am. Alright, let's have a think about that. Alright, so yeah, so I think there is a lot of that kind of talking language. You know, recently I was talking about the sublime, and how just by either the deliberate or careless use of certain terms to do with eternity, to do with infinity, to do with beyondness, beyond space and time, that kind of talk, we're effectively alluding to concepts which underpin religion, concepts like the sacred and the sublime. But I think the same is true more generally of religious concepts more centrally, and I'm thinking particularly of being. This is something Barclay reminded me of. Jim, is it? Yeah, I think it's Jim. Reminded me of recently when he made a comment on one of my videos about Korzybski's E prime. Korzybski, linguist kind of guy, general semantics. He had this idea for E prime, English prime, which is a way of speaking which tries to remove the verb to be from language. Just as a little exercise, I guess. So you would speak without using the verb to be. And I've tried this, and I've done a bit of writing in that style to see what it feels like. And it is interesting. Because the verb to be is such a weird one, isn't it? The verb to be. Yeah, I mean, certainly I notice it most when there isn't a clear subject for that verb. Like you come outside and say, oh, it's raining today. It is the verb to be, it is. But there's no subject, there's no it that's doing the raining. Oh, it's a lovely day. Again, it is, but there's no subject, there's no person, thing, entity that's doing the being of lovely, if you know what I mean. So it's a weird kind of empty subject. But it's implicit in the verb to be. By saying the word it is, you're implying that there is an entity doing the being, a being doing the being, if you like. And that's with all of this being stuff in a weird way. It's a kind of generalised beingness that underpins a lot of the things we say, and presumably a lot of the things we think. If we're saying this stuff, on some level we must be thinking it. And having this being omnipresent in our language sounds an awful lot like God to me. Having an omnipresent being does sound an awful lot like God. So I think there is an argument to be made that even something, and that's just one example, that a verb like being that's in our language and that requires us to use it, at least to a certain extent, and presumably that's in our thoughts, then it's a religious concept. We might not think of it as religious. Maybe it isn't religious in a kind of institutional sense, but it is a bit religious, isn't it? Let's face it. Secondly, can we get rid of it? I mean, I've tried speaking in E prime and writing in E prime, and it is interesting. It does change the way you think, but it's hard, and and you can't do it completely, because lots of things you say use the verb to be followed by something else. I am running. You know what I mean? You could say I run, but a lot of the time you say I am running. So I am doing this thing called being, or being is doing this thing called me, and then there's this running bit at the end of it. So it's very hard to expunge it completely. One of the ways, and this is purely speculation here, but one way that you might do that, I guess, is to refuse to speak English at all and collapse into some kind of artificial language like mathematics. And certainly, you know, mathematics has been held up as a kind of language of nature. I think Galileo said that, you know, the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. You know, there has been a kind of claim for that, going right back to Pythagoras. You know, the Pythagorean brotherhood pretty much worshipped mathematics. But and certainly beginning of the 20th century, when Russell and Whitehead were doing that Principia Mathematica, is it? Something like that. Analytical philosophy, using mathematics as a model and tool. That was very popular. But then what happens, you know, along comes, oh God, what's he called? Mathematician. Demonstrated you can't, there are axioms within mathematics that can't be proven within the terms of the mathematics themselves. Oh, it's completely gone. It'll come back to me anyway. Earlier 20th century, like 1930s, maybe 1940s, mathematician who demonstrated that even within mathematical systems, there's always going to be some propositions that you can't prove or disprove without relying on axioms or principles which lie outside the terms of the mathematics. So you're always making reference to some kind of transcendent, I hate that fucking word, transcendent or alternative or other or outside of kind of reference. God, what was it called? Anyway, yeah. So I think even within mathematics that's a problem. And obviously spoken language, natural language like English. Yeah, it's full of references to beings that don't exist, and that kind of paraphernalia, which I guess religion kind of inherits or perhaps externalizes and puts on faces and turns it into people. So is it a problem? I guess it's only a problem if you take it seriously. If you really think that beings exist outside of space and time, as opposed to being an artifact of language or an artifact of thought, then that would be a problem. I would hate people to start legislating what I could do based on what this weird linguistic artifact had supposedly said. And of course the history of religion is exactly that. People making moral and legal claims based on just that kind of a artifact. But I suppose as long as you think, oh, well, this is just how the mind works, then it's probably not that much of a problem. It does blend philosophy and psychology in ways which might not be entirely comfortable, but I guess that's alright. Anyhow, if anybody can remember the name of that mathematician, do please put it in the comments, because I can't get it. Thanks very much. Beautiful day.